Folks, today we are going to cover an incredible question in my mind, one that you will never have attached to your problems in most cases. When we think about problems, we only think usually in the negative. God certainly sees problems as a very positive thing, in a positive way that he can work in our lives. So the question that we're going to cover today, I'm going to give you right off the bat. How could my problem protect me? We don't usually put problems and the word protection together. In fact, we would usually keep them poles apart. But what we want to do is talk to you about how actually going through problems protects you often from greater things, and protects you by building things into you that protect you in the future. And without problems, you don't accomplish these things. So in Daniel's life, he goes through, as we've learned, last week's message, incredible trauma that would normally sink a person, probably make them a case for the rest of their life. Not this young man, because he saw something in the problems that was God, and he was willing to find the purpose of God in those problems. And so as the problems began, he recognized that God had some purpose in this. Problems protecting us, guys, is not a normal way to think. Agreed?
No, it's not. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. And yet I can look back in my life and through the lens of Scripture and of these great stories, and definitely see where some of these problems that I've gone through have been for my protection from things that would harm me or even just limit me.
Yeah, we often, most of the time we look at painful experiences as just that, like pain. Like, right? We don't like pain. We do whatever we can often to try and stay away from pain. But it is really, when you look back at a lot of those painful experiences, that, like I'm better off having gone through that.
Yeah.
And this is the track record kind of speaks for itself, the track that I'm on. So yeah, I time and time again have been through many of those. So I get it.
And that's growth.
Yeah.
But this is protection.
Yeah.
Literal protection. The idea that what you go through can actually bring you protection right now from maybe things you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is that the protection is even within the problem itself. Let's do a little side story just to make this a little more clear for you. Joseph. A story very similar to Daniel. So Joseph is sold by his brothers. He has a very traumatic experience. A young man again. Yeah. Sold into slavery. His own family, his brothers sold him into slavery. And as he walks through it, if you know the story, he goes through injustice after injustice after injustice. Yeah. Finally, he ends up through God's, can I say, order of events, to become the second under Pharaoh over all of Egypt. And that was the ruler of the world at that time. Yeah. And he was there because of what God gave him in information for a famine upon Egypt. Now, this is a really important thing to see, because at the end of his life, he brings his I shouldn't say that, after it's kind of been many years, his brothers come during the famine to get some food. Yeah. And in coming to get food, Joseph recognizes them. They don't recognize him at first. There's this bit of a restoration. His father, Jacob, is brought. You've got this whole story. But at the end of it, the dad dies. Joseph's getting old. His brothers are getting older. And now his brothers think, dad's gone.
This is it.
This is it. Revenge time. He's going to get us. To which I'm going to throw a scripture up here to show you how protection works. Joseph said in Genesis 50, verse 20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." So he basically says, yeah, you guys did intend to harm me. But guys, don't you see it? This was all God. He intended it for good. He was going to protect the world. He was going to protect you. You wouldn't starve. He was going to protect me. He was protecting all along by getting me to Egypt through, yes, your hand. You know, when you look at your problems and so on, you might not think protection, but Joseph is saying that's exactly what God was doing with this particular set of problems, and painful ones at that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just his own personal protection, but it was affecting many, many others, his own family and all the others who he was able to keep going through a massive famine. So, and I think that can be true. I mean, we've seen that as we've studied these other questions too, that often our problems and how we deal with them can have an impact on other people, and this is no different. They can actually protect others.
Very much. And you can go to health examples on this too. For instance, I've known many people to go through a health crisis, heart attack, some other kind of health crisis, and they come out of it having changed so much about their life, which ends up, more or less, that brought a protection to them. And it was protecting them even going forward.
Absolutely.
And so on. So like there's you can go through a lot of things in life, but sometimes God is letting you experience a problem at this level so you don't get the problem at this level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a friend, his dad needed to go in for a scope to there was something going on in his intestines. So it was just a kind of a normal procedure, but they ended up perforating one of his bowels in the process. And so they had to do sort of like an emergency surgery on him, and they found a tumor the size of like a golf ball or a baseball or something, like pretty big, that they would never have found had that not happened.
So gain protection through a problem. You'll find this in your life also in relationships. For instance, let's say a marriage goes through some early communication problems. Well, the couple feels devastated in that first year that they're having any struggle. But it's actually protection, because if you engage with the issue then, you're engaging with it at this level. That problem's focusing your best energies on change and growth. That leads you that when the bigger challenges would have come, to be prepared.
Yes.
That's protection. Economics, people go through a problem financially and they go through it at this level. If they are engage it correctly and they learn and they change their ways, it is rescuing them from problems here.
Absolutely.
So we find this scale of problem that when they come, often these problems are bringing a protection from what it could be.
Yes.
If you don't deal with this.
I think, being predetermined on how you're going to engage your faith and trust in God and live for God is a huge part of being able to approach your problems in that way. But even if you've been kind of weak previously, a problem can be that very thing that brings that out and gets you to, see these problems as a tool, which I think is how God looks at them, to see that there can be purpose through the problem. And I mean, the thing about the problems and protection is there's a good chance we're never going to know all the things that our problems have protected us from on this side of heaven.
Very little.
But it requires quite a bit of trust and faith, and we might not hardly see it at all. But if you have that trust and that faith, this is my life has an eternal purpose, then we can see how God's using it, and trust at least that He's using it for our protection.
Yeah, and we've talked about Peter. Peter had a problem. Peter was forced to face a problem that Peter wasn't who Peter thought he was, and when he denied Christ and all that, he was presented with how weak and broken he really is. And that led then to the amazing accomplishments that he did with the early church. And same thing, God used that to bring Peter and make him into this mighty man of God.
I think that's, Peter kind of brought these problems on himself in a lot of ways. He was the source of his problems. And then with Daniel, this was a
circumstantial.
Problem. Exactly. And so I think regardless of the source, this can still and is still the result of the problem if you engage it properly.
One thing we know about problems is right within their DNA is growth. Problems don't stay the same size if left untended.
That's right.
So if that's why we can actually trust pretty easily that we've been rescued from many
Yes.
a desperate problem simply by what we have done in engaging with the lessons and learned earlier and gone through that and viewed God's purpose in the problems early on. Let me speak to you as a parent, if you're a parent. One of the great gifts you're going to give your children is discipline.
Yeah.
Because discipline, first off, lets them know that you really do deeply care about their outcome and you're willing to experience the pain of parenting for their outcome.
Yeah.
When it comes to problems, your kids need to be strong, be made strong for the future. And the way a parent can protect a child is by making them actually accountable and face problems in life, discipline problems in their life, because this is setting them up for strength. And strength is a foundation of being able to handle increasing problems that have this DNA in them that keep getting bigger somehow.
Yeah.
Another way to look at this is, I'm going to give you a little picture. There's a practice that Middle Eastern shepherds will use if they are pasturing in wilderness areas, and if they have a sheep that is prone to wander, they will actually take that sheep and they will break a leg purposefully. Now that sheep will heal, but it will have a limp because they break it in a certain way. That limp keeps them from wandering, and you think, oh my, that's cruel. No, that's loving.
Yeah.
Because they are keeping that sheep alive, because that sheep can wander to where the wolves would easily take advantage of them. And so God, in a same sense, may be working in your life through problems, and it might feel like he's giving you a permanent limp,
Yes.
You went through huge loss. You've gone through huge brokenness. I would just speak to you this tonight. I would say to you that limp, though you don't like it, may be God's very stamp of love upon you. He will be with us in the problems. He will walk with us through the problems, but he will protect us also because of the problems. And Daniel, guys, he went further. Like, he had all these tests and problems that are going to come his way. They got pretty big.
Yeah.
But it started with a problem of just, what do I eat here? How far do I go with this?
Yeah.
But it ends in some pretty severe things later, like a lion's den.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, these things graduate.
Yeah.
Your strength must.
Yes.
For your strength to graduate, you must see God's purpose in the problems that you face right now, as he is protecting you and preparing you for the problems to come.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to leave you today on this, to think about this. How could my problems protect me? Talk about it in your group. If you're on your own, meditate it out. Maybe the problems you've got are one of the best things that could be happening for you today and tomorrow, as painful as they are. Does God have a purpose in it? Others have intended it for harm. He's intended it for good, to the saving of many. God bless you. Enjoy the next discussion.